Guys, welcome to the very first podcast from Metal Mastermind. Your host, Jason Stallworth, and co-owner of Metal Mastermind, Ken Candelas. Dude,
Hey,
we're doing this, man.
this is awesome.
We've been talking about this for a little while, and Ken, we're going to cover some really hefty topics on this first podcast here, and it's perfect way to start out 2023 as well, because a lot of these things I think our listeners can put into practice, right? So, dude.
Yeah. I mean, we have thought about doing a podcast for a while. We actually were doing a couple of live things before, and we've come back to kind of going in this format of being able to have some sort of entertainment where we discuss topics that are within the community or things that we think are going to help our audience. And we think for the new year to roll around at this point, it's an opportune time to, I think, address things like people's resolutions and also talk about, what are we going to do in order to make our lives enriched or our careers more, successful or, push forward in that department of our lives. Here at Metal Mastermind, I always feel like we say we're the how-to guy for the modern metal musician, but it's also not just on the stage and in the studio, but also in life, which is really important. Because Jason, you and I, we're both independent musicians. We're not signed to a label. This is not the typical type of thing that you would see coming from a musician back in the day. This is now a much more modern scenario for all of us, right? Where we can have this ability to reach out to more people, and be able to, have a conversation between us and our audience, which is, I think, an amazing thing that has happened over the last, couple of decades with the development of the internet. So, but we want to talk about today. We have a couple of things we're going to talk into is hobbyists' mindsets versus professional mindsets. I think that's an important thing to address. We'll talk about annual planning. And we finally want to talk a little bit about reassessing your inner circle, which is, something that I'm very personally attached to. And that subject, I do have my own story about that.
Yeah, you went through this recently a few years ago, and that's the beauty of what we're talking about, though. It's a lot of things we talk about as independent musicians here, and we'll kind of dive into this as well when we get into the annual planning part. But I used to think that making it as a musician meant you had to be in a touring band that was famous and yada, yada, yada. And that's kind of a old school mindset, although it can happen and it does happen. But you and I have proven to ourselves and hopefully proven to our listeners as well that there are so many other pathways. And that's what we're kind of going to jump into now with a hobbyist versus pro. I think a lot of people, guys, we're all about helping metal musicians, but again, a lot of these concepts will carry over into everyday life. Ken, you mentioned to your career, even if you don't plan to be a full-time musician, you can use the concepts we're going to talk about to help you in whatever area of life, whether you're wanting to get that next raise or go to that next level in your company or start your own business or whatever it is. But so the hobbyist versus professional, I know some folks, I don't know what percentage of our listeners and the people in our courses, right? A lot of them are hobbyists, right? So a lot of them are just kind of like, hey, I want to play guitar, or I want to learn music theory, want to learn how to sing, but maybe you don't have any aspiration to take it further. What would you say to that, though, Ken? Like, I mean, do you encourage people, or do you think we should encourage people, hey, take that next step, or just, music being a hobby is fine?
Well, I'd say, music being a hobby is fine. I would also say that being a musician is not for everybody going that career route. It's a very challenging road. There's a lot of ups and downs. And I would even say many times there's more downs than ups because, you're having this, what are the ups in this case, right? You're creating music, you're utilizing your imagination to bring to birth a piece of music that has come from your mind. Like that's an amazing thing that we as humans can do. Like we have this ability to tap into our muses, right? And as a musician, you're a very emotionally intelligent person to be able to do something like that. Okay, that's because you're tapping into the feelings of how it, you know, it affects you. But to create a career out of music can be very challenging, you know, because you're not always having to think about whether or not, you know, it's just making music. It's also you want to live off of making music, and you have to find ways to become, you know, self-sufficient. Now, you know, Jason, I know you know, but for our listeners who don't know, right? I'm a professor at 2 universities, and I, you know, tell my students all the time that, you know, the music business nowadays is not about, you know, getting that one hit single anymore. It's about
way different.
multiple streams of income. Multiple streams of income. You have to be able to leverage your time and your efforts to create something that is, one, you can use your time to make something actively, right? That can be a job, that can be, you know, anything. It can be you going to a live gig and performing every week or every day. Then you also have the ability to, well, can you earn money passively too, right? That's another part of this. You know, we have to keep the cogwheels turning, you know, so to speak. You know, we can't just rely on one source, because if that dries up, then we're screwed. So that's the thing that I tell my students all the time. And I think, you know, if you're perfectly happy just doing music for yourself, that's great. I would also say don't be afraid to release it, and, you know, see where that goes. I would take any creative endeavor with you know, with a lot of forethought in mind, you know, because I mean, I've been working on my own music for several years, and this upcoming album that I'm trying to release has been in the works for, like, since its inception was like 8 years ago. So it's a long time coming, but you know, but my point is, everything has to be done with intention. So if you're going to go down this route of making music, what's your intention? You know, it's different for everybody. And if you want to do it as a way to just release, I don't think that there's any problem with that. People use it for therapy all the time. But if you have an inner voice calling to you that's saying, you know, this is what you should be doing, and that's the only thing that you think expresses you, then you need to seriously think about stepping up your game and making it into a business and going all in on it. It's really, to me, that's how I look at it. And, you know, what are your thoughts? I mean, do you agree?
Career path. Yeah, I mean, your career path is a good actually, both of us right now are, you know, our paths are kind of different. You know, you and I, we both started Metal Mastermind, so we have that common ground. This is our core business. But I have other things going on, other streams of income. So do you. And Ken, you're the perfect example of someone who you've been ingrained and you really went all in. And I don't know if you look at it that way or not, but I mean, you're a professional audio engineer, you're a professor at universities. I mean, that's a big thing, right? And you're still pretty young, dude. I'm an old guy. You're the young guy. So, but you're a great example of that. Of like, okay, so you didn't get signed on some label, and that's fine, but it didn't stop you from, you know, being involved in music and pursuing some sort of music, being in that environment for a living. Whereas me, I never went all in. I played in bands and I've sang and performed all my life, but really at more of, you know, I don't want to say amateur level, because some of the shows and gigs were a bit more serious than that. But I never went all in until, you know, 3 years ago when I said, screw it. I'm I'm going to leave my corporate job and I'm going to do this. You know, I was in my mid 40s at the time. I suck at math. 3 years ago, I'm 47 now. So I was like 44 years old when I left my corporate job. And I'm like, I'm just going to go all in. But to your point and to the point we're making, as a professional musician, and what by professional, that doesn't necessarily mean like you're known among the masses. I think a lot of those days are kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say they're gone because there are well-known bands out there, but there are a lot more musicians that are making a living off their music or music in general, that you don't know about, that you've never heard of and might never hear of, than there are, musicians that you know about, if that makes sense, right? So to think that you have to be some famous person and have millions of subscribers on YouTube, sure, those things are great, but I've got several streams. I've got YouTube, we've got our YouTube channel. I have my own music. You and I both have our courses out there. I play live solo gigs. We do affiliate marketing for products and all kind of stuff. So that's the professional route. But I think as a hobbyist, though, even if you don't plan to go that route, I think as a hobbyist, like you said, Ken, you can still release your music. And I almost think everybody should have a YouTube channel, man. Just put stuff out there, see where it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a great point. And part of this is you just don't know. That's kind of the beautiful thing about the music industry in a sense. Some people I know have a lot of anxiety about stuff like that. But I think if you've got a creative mind, I think it's a shame if the world can't hear it. So
absolutely, you
have to I'm always going to be an advocate for people wanting to make their career in music. I mean, those are the people that I teach every day. So I understand the sentiment, and I understand the worries too. And I remember in one of my classes, I had an electrical engineering student take a music class, and he was like, Ken, I was doing electrical engineering because I figured this was going to be a good route for me as far as work goes, and but I'm really struggling as far as finding something that I feel like I'm really happy with, and I'm taking your class because I think maybe there's something in me that wants to try doing music. And I said,
that's awesome.
That's amazing. One, that you've come, and I congratulate you. I also think it's very brave of you to do that. You have to explore all your options. You're in college right now. College is the place where you're supposed to, experiment. You're not necessarily in the field just yet. You're still studying. So, and take it from my cousin, by the way, my cousin, Phil Ortiz, amazing guy. He decided in his last semester of college, he was doing mathematics. He left mathematics, the entire major, and he went in music on his last semester. And you know what he did? He went abroad to study in England, for like a semester. Nice. And that's where he met his wife. And he was, just doing on a whim, just saying, I'm going to do something that I love doing. And it led to, an amazing outcome for him, and it's just, this is the time for you to follow a passion, don't be afraid to try something that you enjoy doing, don't worry about the people out there that are saying things like, oh, you can't make a career out of it or whatever.
Get a real job, right?
And you know what? Hey, you can still get a real job and do it too.
You can. Yeah. I did it for years. Yeah.
That is like the lamest excuse to say, I can't do music because I have to do this, and it's like, you can make the time to do it, Sure. Will it take longer? Most likely, but that's okay. Is anybody waiting on you to release an album right now to make it happen? Probably not. So it's okay. Do what makes you happy first, because you have to remember that for the longevity of your life, you have to do that one thing. So make sure it's something that you actually enjoy doing. And the thing about, going back to this idea of, what's a hobbyist versus professional? Well, remember how I said, when it comes to these sorts of situations where there's a lot of ups and downs in music, and so many times there's more downs than ups. Well, the professional is the guy or girl that's going to be doing it regardless if it's a good or a bad day.
Right. That's a good point. Very good point.
That's always been the thing that I've seen, and I've heard other people say it too, and it's like it makes a lot of sense to me. A writer doesn't stop writing because he doesn't or she doesn't feel like it. They just still have to write. They find a way to make it happen.
And a lot of our students can in our courses, that have been in, and you can name any course that we have. By the way, guys, head over to metalmastermind.com. If you don't have any of our courses, do check those out. That's really what we're all about here. But, through our courses, we've gotten emails and I've gotten stuff on my YouTube comments on my YouTube videos of people that are 50s, 60s, even 70-year-old folks saying, man, I'm either just now learning guitar, I've always wanted to learn, or I laid it down 30, 40 years ago, and you know what, I want to pick this up again. And I'll kind of go to something that, I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say, a lot of you know who he is, famous entrepreneur, but he said something to the effect of, when you go to a nursing home, the one thing you'll find is regret. If you sit down and talk to people, and you don't want to be 80, 90 years old, looking back on your life and like, I wish I had taken that chance.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to do that. And whether you do this as a hobby or profession, like we said, if you're doing this hobby as a release, that's fine. But I encourage every one of you, and Ken, we're on the same page. We all of us at Metal Mastermind encourage you, just bump it up to that next level and see what happens, whatever that level may be. Just ramp it up a notch, see what happens. It's not going to hurt you. Right.
Yeah, it's such an important part of this. And how do you do that? I think onto our second part of this podcast, which is planning your path forward. Winging it through life is, and being spontaneous is fun and all that, but it's not productive. And
there's a balance. I think there's a balance with that. I think you can plan.
Yes.
Because if you don't plan, well, you can expect nothing to happen. But you can also overthink as well. I'll tell you guys, and I shared this on my channel yesterday. The one thing that is in my head for 2023 and where I failed in 2022, this year it's all about simplification. Last year I wrote out this big spreadsheet, quarter by quarter, month by month, all this stuff that I had. And I just got overwhelmed by it all. So I'm like, what are the, 3, maybe 5 things, big things that I really want to accomplish this year? So I'm simplifying everything. And Ken, you and I, we just finished our planning session. We did the same thing, and we'll do more than that. Right. But these are the core goals, just a few core goals. We're not trying to boil the ocean. Right.
That's a great phrase. And it makes a lot of sense. You can only plan so much. Because sometimes there's a leeway that needs to sort of accommodate any changes in life, right? Because life happens.
Right.
And I think the idea is you have to be able to create some sort of target that you feel is attainable, not completely out of reach. You can dream big, but you need to reverse engineer that. And what are the steps that need to be taken, right? And you can get as fine with those steps as possible if you wish, but if you get too specific about those steps, then you don't leave any room for error. And then when you do that, then you disappoint yourself if you don't meet those goals, and then you start completely veering off the path because something doesn't allow itself to sort of naturally progress, which is something that's interesting, right? This natural progression in life. And, I've always been a big advocate of, it's not, you don't have to mimic all these, successful people all the time in the way that they do it. You can find your own rhythm in doing things. Because your body has its own natural clock. You have to listen to your body. So being, habitual with certain things, that takes a little bit of practice, but also a bit of awareness about what you're capable of being habitual about. For example, we always meet every week. We always meet every week, and that we made a habit in doing that. I look forward to our sessions every week. I think they're
we have a good time.
they're empowering. We get things done, and that's always been to me like part of this habitual thing in order to move forward in this company, right? So for others, when it comes to like stuff like their music, maybe it might be like in order to get to this next step that you're looking forward, you need to increase on your performance skill. Okay, so if you need to do that, then you need to practice, but you also need guidance on how to increase that performance skill. Come to us for that. Metal Mastermind has a whole bunch of stuff like that. But then there's also, things in your life, like, if you're trying to, get healthier in life. Okay, well, that's a habit that needs to be implemented as well. And those are all things that are unique to everybody, right? So planning your year doesn't necessarily need to be crazy in terms of the amount of detail. But I think if you set a few target goals, and one thing that we feel is very helpful to us is setting a priority list on those goals. It might help you to naturally, reach those incentives. And, you'll do them in other ways, but, that might be different from somebody else, but that's okay. Everybody has their own path. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and it's good. I love the exercise, and maybe we'll share that on a YouTube video, our planning, our how we did that, the simple plan that we made. So stay tuned on the Metal Mastermind YouTube channel for that. By the way, there's a link to our YouTube channel on metalmastermind.com as well. We got a lot of good, helpful videos out there. But I like the idea, and Ken, you and I kind of follow this without even thinking about it. But it's plan, execute, and then measure your results. And if you want to throw in celebrate after that win, but you have to make the plan. A lot of people will fail to do that, right? The old saying, nobody plans to fail, they just fail to plan. And without that plan, you're kind of just dabbling, you're not going to move forward. But a lot of people will plan and they'll write everything out, overthink it, make these long checklists, these things to do, but they won't actually execute the core things they need to execute in order to, achieve the result from that plan. And then you can plan and execute, but you and I know very well if you don't measure those results in some things, right? You and I do a lot of marketing, so when we kick something off, or if we release a new course, we want to measure the results. And I think that comes to, and we won't dive deep into marketing, guys, here, but it comes to getting the right message in front of the right person, that sort of thing. That's kind of going deeper into that. But what I would like to see people do, going kind of back to the hobbyist level and tying in the planning for musicianship, your goal might be, like Ken said, to get better at your craft. So that's your goal for the year. Set a goal. It's like, I want to be able to play these songs by the end of the year, right? And I know that's one goal, and it probably won't take you the entire year to get there, but that's going to be your focus. In going for that goal, you're probably going to find these other little paths to achieve all these other things along with it. And I would say, if you're at the point of musicianship that you can perform and write a song, I'd say, hey, make your goal to release a single this year, right? And in not only writing the song, but also getting the resources you need. Like, let's say you're a guitar player. I'm a guitar player. Well, I can't play drums, so I'm not going to be the weakest link in my single if that's what I were going to release. I would look to someone like Ken here, who's an awesome metal drummer. I would look to you, Ken. Okay.
Thank you.
You're the drummer. And I would say, okay, what do I need to do to achieve that? I'm kind of broke right now, Well, maybe I get a part-time job for 6 months to pay for real drums on my album, right? So there are all these ways that, that you can achieve that goal. Now, if you're in this as a profession, of course, your goals are a bit higher than that, right? You might have an album to release. You might have some tours, maybe playing at the Wacken Open Air is like a goal, that'd be an awesome goal to have,
Oh, yeah.
But, but make that one powerful goal, and that one overall goal, and just make it a priority and write out those steps that you need to take to execute that goal. And it doesn't have to be one, right, Ken? It could be two or three. I think I have like 5 major goals this year that I want to accomplish personally, right? So
yeah, absolutely, man. Everybody has their own, ambition, and, take heed and don't over stress this part of your growth. One thing, for example, let's go back to that plan, execute, measure. Love that, because let's talk about, for example, mixing, right? Something that all of us have a whole big challenge when it comes to mixing. How do you do that, right? Okay, so planning is setting aside time to mix your stuff.
Yeah.
Then executing is actually mixing it. Measuring it is saving every single mix that you've made off of that song and comparing your growth as it's been going over through time, right? I have some of my mixes that have been pre 2020, talking like back to 2018, 2017, those kinds of days. And I'm like, I still have some of those songs that are from this album that I'm making.
Wow.
And I can hear where my mixing skills were at that moment in time. It's like documenting your history. And I listen and I compare, and I'm like, this is a healthy comparison, because it's like, I'm not comparing just to, industry standard stuff that's out in the market, which is, of course, something you should measure against if you're talking about commercial viability.
Right.
But you're talking about your growth as a mixer, as a musician, all these things. And that's how you can measure against yourself, because that's your greatest, enemy or your biggest advocate, right? It's yourself. Right. So conquering that, and that's why we released a song called "You Are Your Master," right?
Oh, we love it.
That's what it's all about, not comparing yourself to others, but only to yourself, and trying to get better every day as best as you can to move in the direction that you're trying to go in. And that's another thing. The thing about progress is that it's not always immediately evident. It's a small victory won over time. So you sometimes don't even realize that you're actually moving forward, because it's like all of these little things are what's doing it, And, one of our old teachers, Leah McHenry, she used to say, just move the needle forward, anything to move the needle forward. And that was, it's such a powerful message, because it's like, it's not always, obvious that that's what you're doing, but every day that you work on your craft, or every day that, you are doing this execution, because that's an important step to all of that.
It is. Yeah. You
have to also reflect on that progress and realize that you have made progress, and, don't forget that. That's a really, really good point. And I'm glad you said that, those 3 words. Yeah. But Jason, when it comes to progress, let's talk about, bands for a minute, because I remember having my own debacle with my own band, and I think this is a good segue into talking about reassessing your inner circle. But, you and I, we're independent musicians that operate our own projects now. Right. And I think that's a very, very popular thing in the music industry, is that you have a lot of solo musicians. They have their own projects. Did you have, a moment in your musical career, or you could talk about, really any point in your life where you felt you really had to reassess what your inner circle was like in order to move forward?
I won't dig too deep into my own past, but I'm 47 years old at this time. I'll be 48 in May. Let's just keep it at 47 for now. but guys, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but a lot of my 20s were kind of wasted. Yeah, I won't go down that road, and even to my mid 30s, about the time when I met my current wife, Candy. I was 33 years old at that time, so we've been together for quite some time, and that's when everything started changing. And I met someone who really brought out the best in me. And I know it's sort of getting off topic without getting off topic, if that makes sense. But, going back though, yeah, I really had to reassess the people that I had surrounded myself with. And it's not always that those people are bad, right? In some cases they might be, right? Some of you might be listening right now. It's like, man, I've got some friends that really drag me down and always enticing us to just really blow off time doing dumb stuff, right? But sometimes it might be the case, well, the friends really aren't that bad, but maybe you're spending time with people that don't have the same type of vision and aligned goals and that sort of thing. So going into being a full-time musician, and we'll say the entrepreneur world, because that's essentially, I know that's a fancy word these days, but entrepreneur, business owner, whatever, it can get a bit lonely. We have a lot of good friends. We do have a lot of close friends, but most of those friends are either other musicians or at least people that have the same values, right? So we can encourage one another. So yeah, I mean, that said, that's something that you do. We encourage all of you to reassess that this year, going into 2023, your inner circle, because it's often been said, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most, right? And that could be give or take a little bit, but if you have a vision, a strong vision to, be a full-time musician or a business owner, or you're trying to rise up the corporate world, maybe you have a corporate job. There's nothing wrong with any of that, guys. I know a lot of you have regular jobs. So if you're trying to move up the ladder, you're going to find that you'll have to reassess your inner circle, and there will be some lonely times, right? That's just the nature of this beast. So
Yeah,
that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, man. That 5 people around you is really key here.
Yes.
And I always recommend that those 5 people are people that are better than you in what you want to be better in.
Yeah.
For like Jason, your skills on marketing are actually I'm envious of your skills on marketing. You are great at what you do. And I learned so much from you. That's one of the key things that I love about what you do. And, when I'm around other people, like at my institutions, some of them have many years more experience than I do in doing audio engineering. So I have to, work on getting better with my skills, because they've been doing this for a long time, and they've taught me many things too. Right. Wow. So there's a whole lot that I love about growth when it comes to, assessing your inner circle. And I used to be around people that were very much not where I wanted to be. They were.
Let's talk about this, Ken. Let's hear a little bit of the story here, because this is a very interesting and important.
It's a story I've told, before, but it is a important story. And what we've got going on with that is, I used to be around people that I used to consider my best friends, and they really were at the time. They really were. I spent a lot of time with them. But our ambitions were different, and so were our skill sets. I used to work at a movie theater, as a popcorn boy, and that's where I met one of my first bandmates.
Nice, dude.
And we bonded over pints of Guinness, and it was a great time. We were having a lot of fun. Listened to a lot of the same music. We would hang around. We developed a close bond through our music, And I remember one time the way how I got him to be a part of the band was, I was actually in college working on a project, and that I needed sound effects for, and he came in and he did all these metal growls, and I was like, bro, let's do this thing together. And we just started collaborating. And I even had an old friend from high school become a part of that at that point, and that was the start of my my band Homeric.
Awesome.
And over the course of several years, I mean, Homeric started in 2014, and we disbanded in 2019.
Yeah,
So
2019. I remember that.
there's several years, of working with these people, and we had a relationship that was, I would say, it was fun, but I struggled with feeling that we were getting a lot of progress done with the time that we had. I felt at a certain point in the beginning, it was a lot of fun, and, it was not a big deal. But as things got more serious, I invested in my own knowledge of marketing and trying to get this thing off the ground. And I just remember, little bit over time, it was this resentment that became, that was building up. And it wasn't being equal on all sides. And to my fault, I was, as the leader of this project, I was giving too much clout to all of my bandmates too. Because I wanted it to feel like a democratized thing,
But you're doing all the work, right? You're carrying the majority of the load.
I was carrying the majority of the load, and I wrote all the songs, but I wanted it to feel like it was ours, and that was my error. I didn't take accountability as much as I should have for what was really mine. And it came to a point where I wanted to change the direction. I met my girlfriend, who is very important in my life. We've been together for almost 6 years now,
and she's such a cool girl. I love Elizabeth, man. She's such a great.
And I see a future with this woman. And this was a threat to them, and that she has a talent beyond any other woman I've ever been with, and she is the modern melodist, our vocal teacher for metal vocal virtuoso, Elizabeth. Yeah. She is.
I use her exercises daily, dude. I mean, the course, I use them every day before every gig. So yeah,
she's incredible. And her contribution to my music elevated it. That was, for me, it was like, yeah, no, this has to be a thing. And they didn't agree, of course. And so I cut them out because they were ending up just disrespecting me, disrespecting her.
That's
and they really were trying to ride off my coattails in all of this, with as much minimal effort as possible. And it was a leech. It was a poison that was really inflicting me for that amount of time. And it hurt tremendously, when I had to cut them out. I was living with them.
I remember that.
Yeah, I was living with them, and I banned them. I was like, okay, yeah, and so I had to move out. They all were staying in their spot. I had to move out, so I moved in with Elizabeth, and this is the result of that.
This is it. And you and I met around that time, I think, if I'm not mistaken. You and I met in the course.
Well, we met long before this all went down. I think it was 2016 that we met.
16, 17. Okay. Yeah, I get my dates
around there. But we started getting really close around 2018, 2019, and that's when we were doing our own mastermind sessions together. And so I spent more time with you. I spent more time with Elizabeth, and the natural progression of my development happened because I had to axe people out of my life in order to bring in what was fruitful to my endeavors too. So
and this sort of ties back to hobbyist versus professional. We're talking about hobbyists. So what and I'm not saying what you were, Homeric was a hobby. I'm sure you had it kind of in your head and in your heart rather as a profession, but
sure.
The way you were going about it was probably the guys and then the band and all was, you had it in your mind and your heart as a profession, but the way you're going about it maybe was more of a hobbyist mindset,
Yes.
but you transitioned. You're like, you know what? I want this to be next level. I want to take it to the next level. This isn't just a hobby, right?
Yeah.
And while everyone else wanted to treat it as a hobby, you're ready to move forward. So
Yeah.
that's exactly what happens, right?
Well, while I was in college, my goal out of that school was I want to walk out of this school with an album. That was my goal.
Yes.
And Homeric was that. So 2016 was when I graduated, and 2017 was when I released Homeric. And, it was from that point on, the rest is history, and of course now Homeric is so much more serious than it was at that time, but I needed that step. I needed that phase of Homeric to happen where it was in the beginning just for fun. And it was, raw and, natural imagination coming together. But, like you said, over the course of time, when things get serious, now Homeric has a very, very specific, outcome that I'm shooting for. I have an entire, story behind it. I have an entire world that I'm trying to build with it. So it is matured, since. And
well, I can tell you this, Ken, and I can tell our listeners this. You had me record the guitar tracks for that, which I was honored to be a part of that. But that was the most complicated, as far as like playing the guitars to that, most complex in a beautiful way, because this goes beyond. And I know I'm giving you a lot of props here on this because
thanks, man.
It's due, but your music goes beyond just, okay, we're just playing a metal song, right? Got some cool riffs, and there are some cool riffs, but your music for Homeric is an orchestration.
Yes.
It's cinematic metal as you label it, and it's just that. It is an orchestration, and that was some of the toughest guitar tracks I've ever recorded in my life, man. So
it's some of the toughest mixing and drumming I've ever done too.
Oh man. So I can't wait for that to come out. You and I both have albums, by the way, coming out. I know you've got Homeric's next project, hope to release in 2023. I am working on my solo album, Overcometh. So I'm hoping to release that early 2023. So those are both in the works. But yeah. By the way, guys, if you haven't heard the Metal Mastermind song, it's under Metal Mastermind is actually labeled as an artist, as a band as well. The song is "You Are Your Master" by Metal Mastermind. Go look that up on iTunes, Spotify, any streaming source, and do check that out. And of course, let us know what you think about that tune. We've got an entire songwriting course built around that as well, which you'll find on metalmastermind.com. So
absolutely.
Do check those out.
Yeah, and we've got a little bit more than that too for "You Are Your Master." I think we should highlight Nick Z's efforts on making Metal Producer Overlord, the mixing series.
So I'll tell you about that. Yeah, that's a good course. And you mentioned something earlier about mixing, right? We use that as an example. I know that's not my strongest suit. So I am going to be diving into Nick's course in detail to mix, because I want to mix my own album. I like that. And of course, I'll have someone else. I'll have probably Metal Mastermind Ken here master it. No pun intended. Metal Mastermind mastering. But hey, that might be something we offer later, guys. But no, I just wanted to highlight, as you're highlighting this course, Nick Z's course, that's something I'm going to dive heavy into, because I know that's a weak area of mine. It's not my strongest suit. And I've said this before, you never want to be the weakest link in something that you're putting out. Yeah, absolutely. And to that note, with a good team involved, right? We could try and do things ourselves, but in reality, things that matter require a team, and we need to realize that delegating our time is an important step to our growth. So having people like you and me, in this situation of operating together is one example of that. But if you're talking about mixing, a mixing engineer's mastering engineer is another relationship. That's a team. Songwriting and musicians, that's a team. You write the songs, other people bring it to life with their skill sets. That's something that I always
loved about musicians. You know, like I wrote something and they brought it to life, and that's a key element about what makes music. Did you know, like when it comes to people like Beethoven and even Bach, right?
Yeah.
These old classical and Baroque and romantic, composers, that they knew that their music had to be interpreted by a musician, that there was a little bit of room for experimentation and improvisation, right? So they wrote as much as they could on those sheet music, but the sheet music was always meant to be interpreted with, gusto.
Yeah, and that's great. That's great you bring that up, because by the way, guys, we have a metal bass course coming out this year, and I don't want to mention the name quite yet because it's a little premature, but I will say that this person played bass on Siren's album A Mercenary's Fate, and he was involved in some other well-known metal bands. I know that I love playing bass, but I'm considering using him on my next album as well, because once again, I don't want to be the weakest link, and I want to give that music someone else's, a professional bass players. I'm not a pro bass player as much as I'd like to call myself one. I'm not. I'd like to give a professional bass player's interpretation, because that's going to bring those songs much more life than what I could do on my own.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to follow your north and bring people along with you that will help you reach that, and
Right.
you may have to say goodbye to people who are not going to be on your boat,
True.
So set sail, man. That's really what it comes down to. Jason, this is awesome. I think as our first podcast for Metal Mastermind, we have so much to offer you guys as our listeners, our audience. Please let us know if there's something you want us to also talk about. Don't be afraid to put it in the comments on our YouTube channel. Or even, if you sign up to our email list, you get access to our Discord, and you can engage with the community over there. I'm active on Discord. Jason comes in on Discord. We have all these people who are just part of our metal family. Let's, come together. And if you want to really elevate your musicianship, that's what Metal Mastermind's all about. And, if you feel like this is also a way to enrich your life by being a part of our family, then we're honored for that too. Jason, do you have any, closing thoughts and words for our audience members?
Well, the only thing, guys, is first of all, thank you so much for listening. If you're still listening, we appreciate you seeing this through, or hearing us through, rather. And guys, head over to metalmastermind.com. Everything we've talked about is right on our website. Really easy to navigate. You can check out our courses there. We've got loads of courses and more coming in 2023. And on top of that, of course, I believe if you scroll all the way down, you can sign up and join our Discord as well. Ken and I will have a podcast section in the Discords where you can leave comments and that sort of thing. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel through that page. So just go to metalmastermind.com and hey, just spend some time on our website and explore all the cool stuff we have for you. But guys, I hope you all have an awesome new year. And as we always say, keep creating music and create your own sound and style.